Okay, hello everybody. Um, Welcome back to Mahamudra for the People. Um, it's been a little bit of a hiatus since I was here to do this uh, last. I had taken some time for retreat in 2021, um, and then I guess. Now I'm back, which is wonderful. And I want to welcome everybody, and I want to welcome everybody from all over the lovely world where you are right now. Um, so today, because we're coming back to this series, which I believe uh, we pretty much nearly finished. Or basically finished. Ninth Karmapa's pointing out the Dharmakaya. Um, so what I want to do is be able to have us start off with a little bit of practice. And so we'll do this. And then I actually was thinking of moving on to The Heart of the Matter by Tsele Neltse Grongjo, this wonderful, I've got the kind of old school, small brown version. I think it now exists as a combination, this text along with The Lamp of Mahamudra. But I think that this is a nice text, especially for those who might be doing the Mirror of Light program that I'm doing this year, also because this is kind of this nice, really beautiful combination of Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And then for any Gelugpas out there, it's Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and Madhyamaka all coming together in this short little text, which is, I find it to be very nice. So just one little housekeeping piece. It is now a little after 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and this will go until just before 3 o'clock Eastern Time, so about an hour and a half. So we'll start off with a little bit of practice, approximately 12 minutes of meditation. And before we begin, just a little bit of a review. Allow yourself to sit as comfortably as possible. For those who are able to hold the seven-point position of Varachana, feel free to do so. Legs in lotus position if that works. If not, half lotus is fine. Back erect. Shoulders, they say, spread like a vulture. Hands in meditation mudra in your lap. They can also be on your knees. Neck slightly tilted downward. Gaze directly in front of you. Tongue relaxed and jaw relaxed. Right? And rely on whatever meditation instruction in this particular moment feels good. And so this could be using breath as an anchor, so allowing yourself to just be mindful of breath, every inhalation, exhalation. Could be using mind itself as an anchor, so whatever arises within the experience of mind. It can also be a visualized object as anchor, so visualizing perhaps the Buddha or Tara or medicine Buddha, for example, right above one's head. Or it can be an actual physical object. So there's a bicycle hanging on a wall directly in front of me, and so across the room from where I am, and so using that as an anchor. So whatever feels good. I'll bring this gong, and we'll sit like this for approximately 12 minutes. And now your screen is now frozen. Appreciate we're practicing for about 4 more minutes meditation. Okay. All right. So, um, it's lovely to be here with everybody. Um, and I was thinking that, we can kind of pick up this series uh, freshly with a new text, and that we could use Sally Natsuko-Rongjo's Heart of the Matter. Um, and why I'm doing this is, or proposing this rather, is that I've always found this to be a very beautiful book. Um, there's that it's beautiful. That's a nice thing. And then next, it's basically a remake, right? It's non-sectarian. So it introduces the view as we find it both, or well, in all cases, and as per the Mahamudra tradition, the Dzogchen tradition, or Atiyoga tradition, and then also Madhyamaka. And so, in this way, this makes this text very helpful for people who may be kind of of mixed lineage, or in a jokey way, like a mixed grill. Um, uh, and then um, and then there's Tseli Neltsok Rongjol as a practitioner is quite just quite extraordinary. So I thought we could start with this if this sounds oh, beautiful, and thank you very much, Sean. Um, I'm going to be using the hard copy, so I may be looking down. Um, and oh yes, yeah. Let me see what happens when I. Can everyone see me? Okay, I assume yes. Okay, great. So okay, I'm going to use the paper copy in front of me because I'm old-fashioned. But so this begins with uh, what Spasti Prajnabhaya, so like um, homage to great wisdom. And he begins off. I'm just going to go kind of page by page, and these are short pages. And for those of you who have not attended any of these in the past, what I do like to do is when I read from texts, just try and allow yourself to sit, and if you can, and that feels good, to close your eyes and just listen to the sound um, of my words, and let whatever reaction or impact from the text that's being read happen to you in the moment. And this is a nice thing because it opens up text, opens up our ability to connect with text. It opens up kind of the blessings as kind of the Lama, the Guru, arising in the form of text. Because the written word is quite powerful, and some of these texts are really profound with respect to pointing out the nature of mind. So, Tseli Neltsok Rongjol begins by saying, this is a little bit of an homage or homage to the awakened mind, utterly pure since the beginning, the uncontrived, innate, the co-emergent Dharmakaya, which is the nature of all things, inconceivable in number. I bow down by realizing the spontaneously present Guru of natural awareness. So this is the first sentence. And here he's really pointing out, just as much as we might, begin a teaching with taking refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, or contemplating the four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. Here Tseli Neltsok Rongjol, who is a great yogi, practitioner, is pointing out that he's basically bowing down and taking refuge via realizing the spontaneously present Guru of natural awareness, right, which is all things, the experience of all things. So in this way, if you just kind of settle yourself in the moment into a kind of meditation state, allowing yourself to notice all the sounds, allowing yourself the ability to kind of stretch out awareness to fill the space around you, noticing the temperature, noticing whatever might be arising in your field of visual consciousness, noticing every sensation, right, and resting into awareness. And so this awareness, this rigpa, or this state of knowing, is what Tseli Neltsok Rongjol is taking refuge in. Bowing down by realizing the spontaneous present Guru of natural awareness. He goes on, Sujata Garbha, so this kind of vast Buddha nature like basis, right? So Sujata Garbha is present as the nature of all beings, right? So this is another way of saying or suggesting that the nature of all beings is Buddha. But due to co-emergent ignorance, they arise constantly. They constantly obscure themselves and sink into the ocean of samsara. Right? And so, he's reminding us that from this resting into the basic state, this recognition of mind as it is, this recognition of appearance as it arises, this recognition of all phenomenon, right? The fundamental wakefulness, Buddha nature that is the nature of all beings. Right? This is the basis. And that being so, we still yet fall into this subject-object dualism. We fall back into a kind of state of discursiveness, a state of constant comparison, constant wondering, constant cognition, through which we mistake the nature of all things, and thereby fall or sink into the ocean of samsara. He goes on, so to quickly liberate them, I shall now explain the innermost profound path. With dread for the painful abyss of the lower realms, without attachment to errant paths, nor the peace of Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, and with the wish to attain perfect Buddhahood in a single lifetime, wise and most fortunate ones, engage yourself in this practice. Right? So with dread for the painful abyss of the lower realms, so we could extend this out towards all 6 realms of existence, right? With dread for the exhaustion of passing through these 6 realms of existence, either literally in terms of birth after birth after birth, or even a little bit more kind of metaphorically, day by day by day, all the ways that we pass through these 6 realms of existence in a day, right? Not necessarily in an even cycle. Sometimes we awaken as hungry ghosts. Right? Other times we awaken as gods or demigods. We begin arguing. Sometimes we go through the middle portion of the day as hot hell beings or cold hell beings. Sometimes, perhaps in the afternoon, we might arise as animals. Right? And other times, we might arise as humans. And so we cycle. And it's useful to kind of check in and pay attention to the extent to which this is the case, and what that's like. So he continues by saying, "How wonderful is the aspiration of the one with that very name." So this is the person who requested this song from him, who asked me, "Please expound on the key points of essential training in the view and meditation of Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and the middle way, or Madhyamaka." To this small token, I offer this small token of reply. And so somebody had requested Tseley Natsok Rongyal to offer, an explanation of the view according to Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and Madhyamaka. And so he's going to do this. And he begins this by saying this: the sole purpose of the different turnings of the Dharma wheels by the victorious ones of the 3 times is to establish sentient beings in the state of Buddhahood. And so this is the sole purpose of all 3 yanas, the Theravadan tradition, the Mahayana tradition, the Vajrayana tradition, is for all of us to be able to recognize our Buddha nature and to fully arise as Buddhas. Right? So it's not to get rich, it's not to get famous, it's not to have cities, right? It fundamentally our relationship to these 3 different vehicles and the ways that we may connect with them is the liberation of all beings, right? The ultimate liberation, the final liberation. And it's important to just kind of very briefly say that it's also very easy in the Vajrayana tradition to become very obsessed with cities or to become obsessed with the benefits of practice, having people do divinations for wealth and things like that. And it's exceptionally important and refreshing to just come back to touching this earth, right? Touching the earth, touching into enlightenment, touching into awakening, and reorienting around this, and kind of getting away from the constant circus that you sometimes find in Vajrayana. So he goes on to say, but due to the diverse mentalities and fortunes of those to be tamed, the teachings to tame them are also different. Right? And this is a reflection of the skillful means that we find in the Buddhist path. So for all of the different beings to be tamed, there are different kinds of instructions. Um, since all are the activity of the victorious ones, there are indeed no good or bad teachings. Right? And so there are teachings. Right? We don't have to worry about higher or lower or anything, because actually whether or not something is high or low doesn't really matter as long as it really hits the target. If it hits the target and leads the person to awakening, then who cares, right? There's no big difference between a high instruction. If that hits the person who is quote unquote high minded, and for whom that instruction is important, then that is enough. For the person for whom the quote unquote low instruction is just enough, then that's the fact that it hits the mark is the most important thing. So nevertheless, by being the support for the path itself, for connecting you with the fruition in actuality, the teachings renowned as lesser, medium, and greater vehicles, all are alike in that through them you realize enlightenment. So again, this is kind of what I was just saying, that it really, the thing that matters is that these instructions have the ability to lead you to realize enlightenment. So again, whether you achieve it through the Heart Sutra, whether you achieve it through Mahamudra, whether you achieve it through Dzogchen, whether you achieve it through Lamdre, completion stage practices like 6 yogas of Naropa, 6 yogas of Nuguma, 6 yogas that you find in Yutok Nintik, it doesn't really matter, right? What matters is the release, right? The liberation. And so in this way, it is, in a manner of speaking, one vehicle. But it is through the special quality of being a short path that the greater vehicle is exceedingly superior. Yet superior to it, the path of mantra is even higher and amazingly unique. And so, now there's a little bit of bias that comes in. So telling not so Guangzhou is like, I guess that being the case, but the greater vehicle, Mahayana, is superior, and then superior to that is the path of mantra or Vajrayana. But I still think that this first point is probably more important. That all Dharma liberates. So the ground, the path, and the fruition. Although these three are taught, samsara and nirvana are still indivisible as the expanse of the three kayas, and the ground and fruition never depart from being one taste. Even though the ground is free of delusion, in order to remove the ignorant delusion of being momentarily unaware of this fact, numerous practices of the path have been taught. So, the ground, the path, and fruition. So these things, the ground, right, is the nature of mind, right? So mind is vast, luminous, and clear. It's primordially pure. It's empty, and yet, as they say, empty and yet luminous, right? Empty and yet everything appears. Right? This is the fundamental nature of mind, right? This is the ground. Right? This is the basis. The path is essentially learning how to rest into this through meditation. Right? So it's the appreciation for developing first, some element of quiescence of mind. As we find definitely in the Mahamudra tradition, there's kind of an emphasis on this shamatha and then vipassana or lakkham, kind of like a vajrayana vipassana. And this is the path, right? The path is resting into the mind's essential nature, the mind which is vast, luminous, primordially pure, spacious, beyond space, beyond time. Right? And then the fruition, of course, is the experience of that, the full blooming of coming into direct, very intimate and familiar relationship with this experience of mind. And so he says that although these three things are taught, samsara and nirvana are still indivisible as the expanse of the three kayas. So he's saying that although these things are taught, samsara and nirvana still arise as the three kayas. So the dharmakaya, the sambhogakaya, and the nirmanakaya. With respect to the dharmakaya, it's the fundamental emptiness of the experience of mind. With respect to Sambhogakaya, it's the fundamental clarity of the nature of mind. And with respect to the Nirmanakaya, it's the fundamental luminosity, the way that everything arises as mind. Right? And so samsara and nirvana are indivisible as the expanse of the three kayas. Everything that arises in samsara and nirvana arises from the basic space of phenomenon. They arise unimpededly, and they're able to be experienced and known. And the ground and the fruit never depart from being one taste. There's no difference between the ground and the fruit. The ground is the nature of mind. The fruit is the full blooming, the blooming onion. It's a full blooming onion of the experience of the nature of mind. So even though the ground is free of delusion, in order to remove the ignorant delusion of being momentarily unaware of this fact, numerous practices of the path have been taught. Right? So, yes, yeah. So even though the ground is free of delusion, the ground is free, it's primordially pure. This is what we find in Hatha Yoga with respect to this kind of idea of katak, primordial purity. In order to remove the ignorant delusion, right, this misapprehension that happens, right, when all of a sudden, maybe I hear somebody honking a horn, or there's a bus out there making a tremendous amount of noise, which causes me to be agitated, and I misapprehend the experience, and I become all defensive, and I want to start shaking my fist at the Brooklyn traffic, right? So in order to remove that misapprehension of being momentarily unaware of this fact, numerous practices of the path have been taught, right? And so this is the beautiful thing about Buddha Dharma, is just the diversity, right? How many practices that exist, right? Sutrayana, Mantrayana, of course the Theravadan tradition, all of these are so kind of incredible. Their essence is twofold, comprised of both view and meditation, right? So for I think we could say, this is probably true of most Buddhist instructions. There's the view and there's the meditation. The view being kind of, the kind of essential idea, right? The concept, the essential kind of clarity of what is being gotten at. And then there's the actual practice of this, which is meditation. But first of all, he says, it is of sole importance to recognize the very meaning of the view. And so now he's going, directly into the view within this context of Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and Madhyamaka. He says there are many types of view, such as the uninformed view of ordinary people, right? So this is a view. Um, it's not a very good view, but it's a view nonetheless. Um, so, and it arises in the misunderstood views of extremist philosophies, right? As they do not lead to enlightenment, I will not describe them here in detail. If you desire to know their fine points, then look in many sutras and tantras of the old and new schools, and in all of the great treatises. Right. So he's basically saying something similar to what I just said. There are so many of these views that go on TBRC, for example, and you could see all of the different views, Sutrayana views, Tantrayana views, etc. There's so many. The old school, so the Nyingma, the Sarma, so that would be the Kagyu, the Sakya, and the Gelug, and all of the sublineages. And he says, go look in all the great treatises, right? And here we begin to see all the different kinds of views. And he goes on by saying that as for the view of Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas of the Theravadan tradition, the Shravakas understand the absence of personal identity, but not in the identity of things. So they hold on to a solidity of perceived objects. Right? And so this is, based on his analysis, with respect, broadly to the Theravadan tradition, there's an understanding of the absence of personal identity, so, no self, right? But not necessarily with respect to other things. And so other things, arise and appear and, arise with a sense of solidity and quote unquote reality. Right? He goes on to continue, through their understanding of emptiness, the Pratika Buddhas realize that there is no object identity in the perceived, but fail to recognize the absence of object identity in the perceiver. Right? And so, again, there's a slight difference. And he says, and therefore they're still deluded. So, again, he's pointing out this difference between the Shravakas and the Pratika Buddhas. And he says the meditation practice of both Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas is to train in the concentrations and serenity of cessation. Through carrying out the 5 paramitas, their conduct is not embraced by vipassana, the paramita of discriminating knowledge, and therefore it is taught that they are in error. So again, this is kind of arising from a Vajrayana perspective. So again, kind of holding still to this first point, that for the person for whom the practice of the Shravakas is ideal, or for the person for whom the practice of the Pratika Buddhas is ideal, there will be a tremendous amount of benefit for the people that connect to those. And then, of course, for the person for whom the practice of Vajrayana is beneficial, then the engagement of the Vajrayana perspective is also ideal. In the Bodhisattva teachings of Mahayana, there are the mind-only and the middle way schools. So the mind-only has 2 schools, the true image and false image. And their view is to claim that samsara and nirvana are mind, right? And so we find this in the Yogacara, for example, that basically everything is mind. The followers of the Svatantrika middle way accept the unity of the 2 truths as the view, while the followers of the Prasangika middle way teach that the view is free from claims, free from labels. All of them, however, train after establishing by means of discriminating knowledge that the meditation is self-aware, natural cognizance, the indivisible unity of cognizance and emptiness. And so this is basically this. Not only is this the view of Mahayana tradition, this is also what we end up finding in much of the basis of the Gelug tradition. And he goes on to say their conduct is to reach a accomplishment through the 10 paramitas, by endeavoring in the twofold welfare of self and others. The fruition, which only occurs after 3 incalculable aeons, is taught to be the attainment of unexcelled enlightenment. So 3 incalculable aeons is quite a long time. However, we can engage in this practice, which um, is not problematic, but it does take time, and so this is kind of one of these issues. What year was this written? Selinato Grandro lived not recently. We can say I'm gonna his exact year. He lived in the 1600s. Why do you ask, Payne? Yeah, 1608. And then he goes on to say that the followers of outer mantra, so Kriya Tantra and Yoga Tantra, hold the view of purity beyond 4 limitations. Their meditation is to train and develop development combined with completion. Yes. And their conduct is to maintain cleanliness and honor the deity. By observing their respective samayas, it is taught that after 7 or 16 lifetimes, they attain the 5 kayas of Buddhahood. The followers of Anuttara Tantra, or the secret inner mantra, hold that the view is empty experience and the world and beings are sacred. Their meditation is passion and deliverance and the unity of development and completion, and is entered through the eminent paths of the 4 empowerments. Through their conduct, such as utterly pure activity, which is the inconceivable skillful means of the general and specific union and liberation, they attain in just one lifetime the supreme and common fruitions that accomplish the benefit of self and others. So this has been a bit of an outline with respect to the different schools. Yes, and that is true that nowadays they may say something else. And don't be sorry. I mean, it is helpful to be, a little critical, of everything, including these things. But so anyway, the point being is, he's laying out the Theravada tradition, the basis of the Mahayana tradition, then a little bit more specifically how that leads into, the different Gillig practices you find, and then of course Kriya and Yoga Tantra, which while being Tantra, tend to focus on cleanliness. So often within Kriya Tantra, there is bathing every day, bathing before practice, and bathing before ritual. Then there's also the avoidance of meat and onions and garlic, alcohol definitely, and so everything is rooted in the adoption of this kind of cleanliness. Kriya Tantra and Yoga Tantra, like Anuttara Yoga Tantra, has visualization and mantra recitation and dharanis. Generally, though, the whatever is being visualized in front of oneself, and one is making offerings to the deity. In Anuttara Yoga Tantra, then of course the things shift a bit. Blessings are conferred through the 4 empowerments that you find in the empowerment or initiation rituals. And then there is either one focuses on this self visualization of oneself as a deity, and then sometimes there's also the front visualization of the deity, where you imagine that the deity is visualized in front of you, mantra recitation, internal yogic exercises often And kind of the goal ends up being this kind of quote unquote unified experience, I think you could call it, um, where the mind of the deity, the speech of the deity, and the body of the deity, through arising in the form of the deity, all creates this sense of unified being. And it's described here by Tsili Natsu Rongjo by saying that they hold the view that the view is empty experience and the world and beings are sacred, right? Sacred in the sense that we are all expressions of the deity. And their meditation is passion and deliverance and the unity of development and completion. So this passion and deliverance having to do with visualizing oneself as the deity, often, if not in direct union with consort, visualized then, specifically as that happening, then kind of in a secret way, as we find with Vajravarahi, for example, the Katvanga representing Chakrasamvara, and then the completion stage practices being, for example, like we find the 6 yogas of Naropa, 6 yogas of Nguma, etc. Through their conduct, which such as utterly pure activity, which is the inconceivable skillful means of general and specific union and liberation, they attain in just one lifetime the supreme and common fruitions that accomplish benefits of self and others, right? And so this is another way of saying, from this place of arising as the deity, sound as the deity's mantra, mind as the deity's mind, form, of course, as a deity, engaging in both creation stage and completion stage practices, one is able to adopt a conduct that is not only pure, but also has skillful means, right? And so this is the way with which we're able to occupy space and be a benefit to others in a way that is skillful. So this is kind of the build-up. There's a siren going by, if you can hear. So he goes on to say, these individual stages of view and meditations on all levels of the vehicles are found in the countless sutras, tantras, and treatises. So what is the use of someone like me explaining them here? In general, I am devoid of learning, and in particular, I have neither studied nor reflected on the scriptures, including the middle way, logic, and prajnaparamita. So for me to persist while unacquainted with their specific views would only provoke contempt from learned people. Out of sincere interest in the inconceivable Dharma Dhatu, I will therefore rest my case. So he says, what's the point of me kind of going into all these details, right? I don't know anything. I'm not particularly special. I'm devoid of learning. Haven't studied anything. So for me to go on and on and on would only provoke contempt, from Panditas. And this is also true of me. But he goes on, the heart of the matter to be explained here, uniformly taught by most learned siddhas of the old and new schools, is that the difference between mantra and the philosophical vehicle lies not in the view, but in practicing the vital points of skillful means. There are some who claim a huge difference, but this old simpleton has found that the essential point, the crucial meaning, is that although the nature of the view is the same, any difference merely lies in forming or not forming a conceptual attitude, or in having or not having personal opinion and fixation. Right? And so, here he's coming back to this point that there the difference doesn't lie in the view, right? The view is all the same. And yes, thank you, Melissa, for asking your question. I'll answer it in a little sec. because we'll be at a good breaking point in a moment. So the view, the problem or the differentiation between all of these different kind of approaches doesn't have anything really to do with the view, but with people's ideas, right? Their conceptual attitudes, their opinions, and their point of fixation with respect to all of these practices. It says, although no defining characteristics exist in themselves, the attempts to establish intellectually by scrutiny and conceptualizing the various claims that something is empty or not empty, and with or without limitations, is never taught to be the view of Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And to believe it is free from limits or it is emptiness is nothing other than straying from the view. Rather than holding a view of mind-made assumptions, realize your indescribable and unformed innate nature through nakedly recognizing self-knowing wakefulness as a basic state of what it is. Right? And this is a really beautiful point. So Tseli Natsuk Rongjol is saying, any attempt to intellectually or through conceptualization establish that something is empty or not empty, or that something is free from limits or not limits, falls into this idea of holding a view of mind-made assumptions. Right? He says, rather than doing this, realize your indescribable and unformed innate nature through nakedly recognizing self-knowing wakefulness as the basic state of what it is. And so this is why we practice meditation, right? We don't practice to get into debates. We don't practice to kind of explain, why the bicycle is hanging on the wall in front of me, or why there's a carpet on the floor and it's not on the ceiling, or whether or not this carpet is real, or whether or not my voice is real, or anything, right? The real essence of practice is to directly experience this innate state, right? Rather than talking about the thing, rest into the experience of the thing. Right? And this is important because um, we can get into this a little bit later, but I think that there's a lot around fear and anxiety that shows up through, diverting our own kind of practice and or experience of meditation from direct experience to a more conceptual kind of analysis. Does that make sense? And so rather than get involved in like debate, rather than getting involved in epistemology, rather than getting involved in all of these things, the way that we can cut through our suffering, the way that we cut through our constant pain, our constant brokenness, our constant heartbreak, is to engage in practice. Right? And so this isn't to say, this is like an inherently anti-intellectual path, because that's not true. But it's understanding the difference between a bunch of words and resting in luminosity. Right? They're two totally different things. So I'm going to answer or attempt to answer Melissa's question. So Melissa asks, and I just want to remind, I'd failed to do so earlier. If anybody wants to ask a question, you can go to the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of the page and ask it, or you could type something into the chat box. So Melissa asks, later, can you clarify the Dharmakaya, Nirmanakaya, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, emptiness, clarity? Nirmanakaya is luminosity. How is luminosity different than clarity? Is luminosity the union of emptiness and clarity, both qualities. And real quick, yes, Kendon Lodro, trusting in one's experience versus trusting in conceptual indifference. Indifference is a good word. So Dharmakaya, right, is emptiness, right? And so what does emptiness mean? So this experience that is simultaneously not of any labeling, beyond all labeling, having no independent essence, right? So this is the Dharmakaya, right? So this is how mind arises as Dharmakaya, right? Now, with respect to Sambhogakaya, there's clarity, right? Clarity is the ability, this kind of knowing aspect, right? This kind of the immediacy, right, of everything. And the luminosity has to do with appearance, right? Luminosity is appearance, right? So when something is luminous, it has quote unquote appearance qualities, right? And so that's what I mean by this, right? Essentially, the luminosity is just the expression of Dharmakaya, right? Nirmanakaya is also just the expression of Dharmakaya, right? Sambhogakaya is also an expression of the innate vast emptiness of all things, right? So to be able to we're not really looking at separating these things out, right? Like, again, kind of going back to Genin Lodger's point, right? To separate what's the difference between Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya, right? We can parse these out and put them in all different boxes, but then what are we doing, right? So within the context of this particular kind of presentation, what Silly Nuts of Guangzhou is pointing out also is how Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya show up, for example, in one's meditation session. Right? Dharmakaya is the nature of mind, the nature of Rigpa, right? The nature of awareness, right? Vast, primordial space. Sambhogakaya is the clarity of that, right? Which in one way of speaking, or one way of saying, is almost like the energetic quality, right? It's clear, it's vast. Right? Clarity is expansive. You can't find clarity. Clarity can't be put in a box. Clarity can't be grasped, right? And then luminosity. Luminosity is kind of like the shimmering light on a lake. The reflection of light on a lake that has slight waves, right? That kind of shimmering quality, right? And I don't mean literal shimmering, like all the ways the light bounces off everything. It's the way appearance arises, right? That's the luminosity. So is that helpful? So in one way of speaking, you can't even take the three apart from one another, and this is how they all rise as the Svabhavikaya, but because we're using words, and this is the tricky thing about all of these things, Mahamudra, Dzogchen, etc., is we rely on words, we rely on symbols to be able to communicate things, right? And this is what also makes the practice of meditation interesting and quite challenging sometimes, is that sometimes we will, with respect to shamatha can be approached in a way which is very fresh and dynamic and open, right? And it can also, we can accidentally turn it into a practice that is very dull and dead and lifeless, right? So for our purposes, we're really trying to kind of zhuzh it up, make it alive, make it fresh, make it dynamic, right? To be able to rest freely into the three kayas in the moment without overly fixating, right, on form, without overly fixating on uh, you know any kind of any kind of point of reference that is philosophical in nature, right? Not because we hate philosophy, but because we recognize that that pulls us right out of the experience of direct experience of mind itself, right? Direct experience of what it means to be interconnected to all phenomena. Capiche? Good. Okay. So I'm going to do one little next section, and then maybe we can sit and this is good because it has a couple of quotations that he cites, and so um, here, so Tili Natsa Wangdro says, in the Noble 8,000 Verses, the Buddha says, Subhuti, that being so, this transcendent knowledge fully remains as inconceivable action, and thus is not the domain of common thought. Why is this? The fire truck is going by. Why is this? It is because it does not involve the attributes of dualistic mind and mental events. Right? So, transcendent knowledge fully remains as inconceivable action and is not the domain of common thought because it does not involve the attributes of dualistic mind and mental events. So he taught. Tilopa also mentions, Keho, this self-knowing wakefulness lies beyond words and the reach of thought. Maitrepa, my secret love, says, all phenomena are empty of their own identities. The conceptual attitude which holds them to be empty dissolves in itself. To be concept-free and to hold nothing in mind is the path of all Buddhas. I'm just going to repeat that. All phenomena are empty of their own identities. The conceptual attitude which holds them to be empty dissolves in itself. To be concept-free and hold nothing in mind is the path of all Buddhas. Right? I mean, when we stop, like, and think, all these concepts of how many concepts we have dealt with today. I mean, I can think of so many, and in my meetings with students, earlier today and then, later after this, A, we rely on concept, obviously, to communicate, but B, most of our problems, right, most of the ways that we suffer have to do with the rigidity of some of these concepts, the primacy of some of these concepts, the volume. Some of them are quite huge, these concepts. And it's not to say none of that stuff matters, right? But our falling prey to this constant, conceptual reification or an imprint on all phenomena, this kind of like false ordering principle that we apply onto everything causes our suffering. It's a Kacho Lutring, who I believe is Shamar Kachapa, says, this is limited. This is free from limitations. So these statements, this is limited and this is free of limitations and so forth. This view of holding such eminent claims will shroud you in falsehood. In the ordinary view of simply what is, you see no thing, and yet it is seen. What it is. This view of holding such eminent claims will shroud you in falsehood. In the ordinary view of simply what is, you see no thing, and yet it is seen. He continues, the two truths of the learned scholar may be full of logic and citations, but miss the vital point. To split it into two spoils non-duality, and forever spins the conceptual machine that accepts and rejects. to split in two spoils non-duality and forever spins the conceptual machine that accepts and rejects. There's an untold number of such quotations. This is what Natsa Grongdrol reminds us. So I'm going to pause here for us to be able to sit for about 10 minutes. And why we're doing this right now is, again, with this idea in mind of how easily we split, right? We split into this and that, subject, object, good and bad, right and wrong, hot and cold, preferred, not preferred, right? Attachment and aversion, hope and fear. So, to try and get free of that, and especially maybe, because I really love him. Like, just to take this one line from Maitreya, to be concept free and hold nothing in mind is the path of all Buddhas. Right? So let's keep that in mind, to be concept free and therefore walk the path of all Buddhas. And we'll sit like this for 10 minutes. Allow yourself to rest into direct experience of mind, of experience, sensation. Rest your awareness. Rest into direct being. So, maybe moving forward between now and next Friday. And thank you, George, for the kind words. We'll continue this next Friday, but I think that spending a little time between now and then, really reflecting on these points of being free. What does it mean to let go of a conceptual attitude, holding on to objects, holding on to everything that arises in experience, so that everything can dissolve into its own nature, into its own arisal. And so when Talopa says, Keho, the self-knowing wakefulness lies beyond words and the reach of thought. How can we, over the next week, begin to train in resting into an experience that lies beyond concepts and arises beyond words and thought? Direct experience. Letting go of all of the analysis. And this doesn't mean don't be self-reflective, but again here, just as the Buddha says, this transcendent knowledge fully remains as inconceivable action and is thus not the domain of common thought, because it does not involve the attributes of dualistic mind and mental events. Just taking a moment to reflect today of all the ways we've fallen into a dualistic, frame, dualistic, framework with respect to what we've experienced. Whether or not we've conceived of ourselves or a situation as good or bad, or conceived of another, some person, right, who we may have been in relationship with, right, in a way that is preferred or not preferred. And how to be able to let go of not only this conflict in relationship to dualism, but then also the kind of intense love and compassion and joy, this blissfulness that arises in just being able to experience things as they are, without projection, without labeling. And that's what these practices aim us towards, free of conceptual labeling, free of projection, so that we can arise free of projection. And we can also liberate everyone from the prisons of projection that we put them in. And this idea of you are like this, you must be like this, that is like this, that tastes bad, that tastes good. Wanting and then not wanting. So, in any event, I hope that this has been helpful. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week, same time, same place. And until then, I hope that your practice is deep and vast and powerful and expansive. And I will see you soon.